We just finished talking about parallelograms. If we were to take a parallelogram, or let's start with a rectangle because that's kind of the easiest one. If we were to take a rectangle, which the area of a rectangle is base times height, and if we were to cut that rectangle in half along the diagonal, what we end up with is this triangle. So if I were to take that area and divide it by 2, I end up with a triangle. That is why the area of a triangle is half of the base times the height. So some of you you just kind of say it, half of base times the height, or some of you like base times height divided by 2. Now again, just like with parallelograms, the height and the base are always perpendicular to each other. So you look, there's that height, there's that base. Imagine these triangles were cut out of plywood. This triangle, this obtuse triangle right here, is cut out of plywood. How tall would it stand up if I needed to get it through the door or get it into my car if I needed to stand it up? So that's how you always look at that height, look for that little bitty h like we talked about with that perpendicular. Okay, so don't forget to divide by 2 when you're doing a triangle because it is half of a parallelogram. So let's look at some examples. We're going to use this formula. So anytime you see a triangle, we know that we need the area is base times height divided by 2. So we go and we find the pieces that we need. There's my base, there's my height. So I plug it in. So my area is equal to my base, which is 10, times my height, which is 7, and divided by 2. And I find out that my area is 35 meters squared. Okay, so for number 2, the area, this is a right triangle, but it's still, you find that right angle, and you have your base and your height. So again, it's a triangle, so it's base times height divided by 2. So we have our base of 12, we have our height of 9, and then we have divided by 2 because the equation says so. Well, 12 times 9 divided by 2 is 54, and that's in meters squared. Units matter, right? Meters squared are different from inches squared, are different from miles squared. So it is important to include them in your answer. Number 3, this one is important, and here's why. It's this obtuse triangle, so we need the height. Well, it could be 14, it could be 9, it could be 8. Which one is it? Well, and any one of those could be your base. What you got to look for is where's your perpendicular. So find that h in your picture. Here's my little h. So that is the height. The height and the base are perpendicular, or the extension of it is perpendicular. And so we don't use the dotted line part, we just use the base. So that's still perpendicular to it at a right angle. So I use my formula, area is equal to base times height over 2. So my base was 10, my height was 8, and I divide by 2. And so I get that my area is 40 meters squared. Now, when we look at number 4, a problem that we have is I need my height. Here's my height. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any measurements on it. Well, it's perpendicular. Here's the piece that it's perpendicular to. Now notice that's the solid line. The 3 is on a dotted line. The dotted line doesn't actually exist. So I'm going to need the 3 to find the height, but I don't need the 3 when I'm multiplying the area to find the base. So let's go find the height. Notice that's a right triangle. So if I need my height, then my height squared plus 3 squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. My Pythagorean theorem again, anytime you've got right triangles, that comes in handy. So we have h squared plus 9 equals 25, or h squared is equal to 16. Square root and square root. So we find out that our height is 4. Now we have what we need. So now I use the equation for area. Area is base times height over 2 because it's a triangle. The base of 4, the height of 4, and then divide by 2. So I find out that the area is 8 meters squared. Now, we talked about a 3, 4, 5 before, right? Those 3, 4, 5 triangles, that's that Pythagorean triple. So if you knew your triples, then you didn't even have to do Pythagorean theorem. You could just put a 4 there and be done. This next one's going to be important in that same way. Now notice, I don't have a height drawn. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's not drawn in yet. So I'm going to draw it in. That's how tall that triangle is. Well, this is an isosceles triangle because those two sides are 13 and they're equal. Remember that when we draw in that height, that altitude, it cuts the base in half. So we're going to use this part of the triangle to find the height because we don't have the height. But I need it. I need that height to go with that base. So we look at our triangle. I notice I have a little right triangle and I need the height. Again, we use Pythagorean theorem. We're not going to use trig and we're not going to use special rights, but you do need to know how to use Pythagorean theorem. Now, if you recognize this is a triple. If you don't recognize it, it's okay. Just do Pythagorean theorem. So 144 equals 169. So h squared is equal to 25. Square root of both sides to get h, because I don't want h squared, I want h. So h is 5. So the height is 5. Now we use the formula for area. Area is equal to base times height divided by 2. Base was 24, height was 5, and divided by 2. So 12 times 5 is 60, and that would be meters squared. Okay, there's the other one. So don't forget your triples, right? You got your Pythagorean triples. They help get you some shortcuts. We've got a 5, 12, 13. We got a 3, 4, and 5. We got an 8, 15, and 17. And a 7, 24, 25. Again, if you don't memorize those, it's okay. You'll just do Pythagorean theorem when they work that way. Okay, sometimes it's just nice to have that shortcut. And then this last problem, notice this time I have my area and I have my base. I want to know my height. So again, write the formula down first. Area equals base times height over 2. And then substitute in what you know. Well, here's what I know, and I'm going to substitute straight in over the top of my equation. My area is 238. My base was 17 over 2. So I have 238 is equal to 17h over 2. Well, I think the easiest thing to do here is you could just do 17 divided by 2, and you get 8.5. So 238 is equal to 8.5 times h, and then divide both sides by 8.5. 238 divided by 8.5 is 28. So the height is 28 meters. Okay, so to do that, I just divided by 8.5. So first, I just fixed this 17 over 2. I did the math I could do. That's where the 8.5 came from. So the area of the equation for the area of a parallelogram is base times height. The area for the triangle is base times height over 2. And just like before, you always look for the base and the height to be perpendicular to each other.